Hello. I'm trying to, I shrunk the screen down too small, so I couldn't tell if I actually pressed the button to go live. So, hello, everybody. Good evening. How are y'all doing? It's another Tuesday evening and not at our typical scheduled time. I didn't tell anybody once again I was going live this time. So we'll give folks a little bit of time to get their YouTube notification. And if you would like to be notified when I go live and when I upload a new video, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. I think down in that corner right there. You can subscribe, you can turn on notifications. That way YouTube tells you what's going on with me since I can't seem to keep a schedule. Hello, friends that are joining me live. If you are catching this on the replay, hey, thank you for joining us as well. Be sure to shout us out in the comments if you are here on the replay. Today's topic is an interesting one. If you've been wondering kind of why I've been a little hit or miss on the past 6 Tuesdays or so, it's because I have been taking an intensive Spanish class every morning. And you're like, well, what does that have to do with us on Tuesday nights? My house cleaner comes on Tuesdays and I try to get out of her way so that she can work in peace. And that means after hours of Spanish class, then being outside the house, trying to find some place to eat and all kind of stuff like that. I am often exhausted on Tuesday evenings. And so being able to show up at the time we had agreed on and having the energy and all of that, it's been hard these last 6 weeks, but yay, today was the last day of my current Spanish class. I do have an exam. I have a written exam tomorrow and an oral exam on Thursday. Why am I telling you all of this? Because that's what sort of inspired me to talk about this subject. Do you really need to learn another language to move abroad? I have been living abroad for almost 9 years. Next month will make 9 years. I have lived in 4 different countries outside of my home country, and none of them have been English-speaking countries. And so I've got a little bit of experience living in a place where you don't speak the language. So I thought that's what we should talk about tonight. And if y'all have got any questions, please drop those in the chat. If you've got any helpful hints or tidbits, drop those too. If you are new here, because I did not introduce myself, but if you are new here, hello, glad you're here. My name is Adelia Abor-Shade. Although most people know me as Picky Girl Travels the World, this is my channel, and on it, we talk a lot about my experiences as a primarily solo traveler. I think at this point, I've been a little bit more than 60 countries. I don't know. I've been living abroad for almost 9 years. And so we talk about those things here on this channel, particularly for other Black women, because, sometimes it's hard to know what that experience is like for us unless you see somebody else who's doing it. And so those are some of the things we talk about on this channel. If that's what you've been looking for, girl, what you waiting on? Why you not subscribed to the channel? So, but that gives you a little bit of background on me and why we're talking about language learning. Like I said, I am wrapping up my intensive Spanish class. Today was my last day of class. So moving on from here, hopefully we will be more like on time, on schedule, because it has been exhausting. And y'all know I don't like to work I don't like to do things that feel like work, and this has been work. But so let's talk about this. Do you need to learn another language if you are going to move abroad? The short answer is no. And I don't know if y'all find that surprising or not, but particularly because most of the people who watch this channel are from the United States, Canada, the UK, English speaking countries, because I don't do YouTube videos in Spanish. So I'm talking specifically, primarily to folks coming from the US. You don't have to learn another language to live abroad. You could move to a country that already speaks the language that you speak. And if you're watching me from the US, there are quite a few countries where English is either a legal official language or it is at least like a de facto official language. And, you know, there are the obvious ones like the UK, Republic of Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. There are obviously those places, but there, you know, like if those places aren't of interest to you, don't forget about Malaysia, Singapore, Ghana, South Africa. You know, think about those countries in the Caribbean that used to be British colonies, the Bahamas, Belize, who else? Barbados. You know, there are quite a few countries that English is a major language that you could go about your daily life speaking English. So, and whether you're interested in being in Latin America, because Belize is in Latin America, the Caribbean, technically, we're going to include that in Latin America. If you want to be in Africa, there are African countries. Think about all of those former British colonies. Now, they may have multiple official languages, but English is one of them, as well as, you know, out in the Pacific. Fiji, I think English isn't technically the official language, but it is widely enough spoken and used by almost everybody, like to do business and that sort of thing. So you've got quite a few options if either because you lack the interest or the patience or the motivation to learn another language, you do have some options if you choose to move abroad. Now, yes, you can move abroad and not learn another language, but what is that experience going to be like for you? I can share what my experience was like. I have lived in Honduras, Mexico, Kuwait, and China. I do not speak Mandarin. I do not speak Arabic. And when I moved to Honduras, I did not speak any Spanish at all. Okay. I think it is important if you know you're weighing out where language and learning a language fits in your move abroad. I think it's important to kind of think about what your life is going to be like. When I moved to Honduras, I had a job lined up teaching at an international school where the language of instruction was English. So I would be doing my job in English. I would be working with people who spoke English. And so for the most part, I got by without having Spanish. Now, when I had to get kind of out of the bubble of people that I worked with, that's where things got interesting. Going to the mall, going to the grocery store or the mercado, trying to travel throughout the country, a country where English is not widely spoken at all. There were, I don't know if difficulties is the right word, but it wasn't it wasn't super easy for me to do that. Um, but because I was there and I was working with people who spoke English, I was able to navigate a lot of things that if I couldn't navigate them on my own, I could talk to people at work and then they would translate for me, or they would help me find the information that I needed in order to take care of whatever transaction I needed to. Um, Living in Kuwait, again, I was going there to work. I think if you are moving abroad and you will not be working with other English speakers, your experience is going to be a little bit different, because if you don't speak the local language and you don't have this built-in community of people who are at least bilingual, speaking English and whatever the local language is, what's it going to be like to navigate things like going to pay your water bill, your electricity bill, looking for, Tony Chachere, or in my case, trying to find peanut butter that didn't suck, um, and trying to communicate that to store clerks. What is that going to look like if you don't have this built-in community of coworkers who already speak the language? So, living in Kuwait, I was working. Living in China, I was working. So I had a built-in community of people who spoke English, although it was really small, particularly in China. Kuwait was slightly different, and I didn't mention this when I said countries where the official language is English, but if you are considering spending a significant period of time in a Gulf Coast country, a Middle East country like Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, because there are so many foreigners in the country, actually more foreigners than there are locals, because they need those people to come in and work in the country. English has kind of become the lingua franca, the language of doing business. So even though I did not speak Arabic, and I sure as hell couldn't read anything in Arabic, I actually had a fairly easy time navigating things in Kuwait, because English was the de facto language of business. There were a few places, like going to the grocery store. It might take a little bit more effort to find somebody who spoke English, but like going to the bank, different things like that. I could go to Marble Slab. I remember this. I went to a Marble Slab, and here I am from the US, from Texas, and the dude who was waiting on me was from Nepal, but yet he's doing my order in English. So in those particular countries, because English is common for business, you can get around pretty easily not knowing English, but you're never going to like become part of the community not speaking Arabic. And honestly, even if you speak Arabic, I don't know. They're kind of funny acting over there. Now China, China was super interesting. I had a total of 3 words of Mandarin before I moved there. I believe I have a total of 4 words now after living there for a year and a half. Again, I was there to work. I did not just move to China for the fun of it. That is actually particularly hard to do. So because I was working for a Canadian school, the language of instruction was English. I was housed in a public Chinese school where the kids who came to our school were also working on their Chinese diplomas. So the kids were already bilingual. Everybody I worked with spoke English. So I had that built-in number of people, but that was a staff of maybe 10 people in a city of 8-9 million people. I think in the entire city of 8 or 9 million people, there might have been 5,000 foreigners total from all over the world. So the experience was a little different than when I lived in Honduras. The number of people who spoke English significantly smaller. And so my ability to get things done, I had to depend heavily on those people I live with. Very different experience than living in Mexico. I did not come to Mexico because of a job offer. So I went from previously living places where I had this group of people who spoke English to I got here and I didn't really have much Spanish beyond grocery store level Spanish. And I had to navigate getting an apartment, paying bills, getting my immigration paperwork done. And unlike, let's say, the United States, there is no, Mexico has 68 or 69 official languages. English is not one of them. The main language of business is Spanish. So I could not, virtually nobody at immigration spoke English. And I did my visa myself. Most businesses, things like that, when I got here, people didn't speak English. And because I didn't have that built-in group of people at work who spoke English, not being able to speak Spanish, when I got here, kind of impacted the experience. So, like we said, you can move somewhere and not speak the language. You can survive. I don't think you can thrive there fully because you can't be your full self if you don't speak the language. We had a question here. What are you doing to keep what you have learned and to continue developing your Spanish? That's a great question. One of the things I did intentionally, even when I moved here back in 2017 on my own with zero support, I made a point to live in areas where people did not speak English because I wanted to force myself to use the language, use the local language, even though I didn't have that much of it. And that's kind of how I discovered how poor my language skills were. I was a little full of myself when I left Honduras. I was like, I've lived in Latin America for a year. I got some Spanish. No, I didn't. I got here and struggled to do anything beyond go to the grocery store and maybe order food. And again, I did not have the support system. Me and Google Translate, we had to figure it out. So one of the things that I do to force myself to use the language skills that I do have and that I am developing, because that's one of the things I had to come to terms with. It's not learning another language, particularly if you start in your 40s the way I did. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's an ongoing process. And so choosing to live in areas where the people in the stores, in the restaurants, in the businesses all speak the local language and would not speak to me in English, that was intentional. Now that I have finished this particular class, which I will not be enrolling in another one, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is, I do have a plan to continue to develop my skills. Basically, it is going to be about allocating time every day to listen, to speak, and to write in Spanish. And I don't know if y'all got interest in the specifics of that, but basically that is the plan. I will probably be spending about an hour a day doing that, which is different than the class I'm just wrapping up, which was 5 days a week, 2.5 hours a day. It was much more intensive, but that's not realistic for me in the way that I live my life. But I will focus on, making sure that I am speaking the language, I am reading it, and I am listening. And so the listening part is easy because I do consume media in Spanish, but I also consume a lot in English. Um, okay, so we said you don't have to learn another language. You can move to a country that already speaks the language that you speak, or you can just thug it out in a country that has a different language. You can do that. But I would say that it's going to really be hard to go beyond just survival. You can survive, but I don't think you can thrive in a country where everybody else speaks a language different than yours. There are some advantages. Now, I didn't start, uh, I'm laughing at you, Cher Allen. With this menopause, I can't even remember English words. Girl, you ain't said nothing right there. This perimenopause over here, the way I will try to string a sentence together, sometimes the words are English, sometimes the words are Spanish, and my poor roommate is like, you're saying words, but I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying. So yes, it's definitely more of a challenge. And I will say, I completely underestimated what learning another language would be like. Like, yes, in school, I took Latin, I took French in high school, I took French in college. Um, like I've done that, but that's very different than using the language as part of your life. I had taught kids who had come to the US, who had arrived very recently and like were functional in English in like 6 months. And so I thought that's what was going to happen for me at 41 years old. When I moved to Honduras, I thought, oh yeah, I'll just pick up the language. I wasn't seeing all of the work those kids were doing to pick up the language. I think also how you are living kind of impacts how quickly you can pick up the language. What I didn't think about was that my kids who were not English speakers, my students who were not English speakers, were probably like their parents were probably depending on them to learn the language. If they're trying to get an education, they've got this thing pushing them, motivating them, driving them to learn the language. When I moved to Honduras, what was driving me to learn the language? A desire, but I didn't have to, I didn't need to in order to do my job. Now, had I moved there to do a job in the local language, I think my motivation and my drive to learn Spanish would have pushed me a little harder. But yeah, I thought I was just gonna, through osmosis, learn Spanish in 6 months. I was wrong. I did not. And that's when I figured out, like, oh no, girl, you're gonna have to be like intentional about learning the language. And when I came to Mexico, I did get intentional. When I moved to China, when I figured I was going to be there more than a year, I did make an effort. But China is the only place in the world I have ever been where when you are, as a foreigner, are trying to speak the language, nobody tries to help you. Nobody goes out of their way to try and understand what you're saying. They're just like, you didn't say it correctly, therefore I'm not going to respond. And whether I was wrong for this or not is not important. But me, I was like, oh, you're not going to try and work with me? I'm not going to bother to try and learn the language. That's not the kind of attitude I'm proud of, but I did. And so I gave up on trying to learn the language because it's a very difficult language. To read, couldn't read anything. But tonal, that is not, that's a difficult thing for English speakers to pick up. And I would go to a place and I would say the thing, and they would literally stare at me, just dumbfounded. I remember flying to Hualien, and I was pronouncing it based off of the Roman alphabet, like our alphabet. And I kept saying the name, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And so I finally pointed to it, and they were like, "Oh, you should have just said," and they said it. And I was like, "That is literally what I said." So that made me give up on trying to learn the language there. So yeah, I was overconfident in trying to learn it, but in the years since, of taking lessons, of listening to music in my target language, and that it has gotten a lot easier to communicate. I can do pretty much all of my daily things, I can do those in Spanish. Now, the quality of my Spanish is not where the quality of my English is. And I have had to come to terms with that. That may never happen for me, but I can communicate more easily. So that's a reason why, even though you don't have to learn the language where you're in another country, I think you ought to try, is because it makes communication more easily. You get to become a part of the community, the larger community, and sort of differentiate yourself from tourists or people who are going to be there very short time. I can't tell you the number of times where, because I am more obviously a foreigner to some people here. So they have very low expectations for my Spanish ability. And then when I am carrying on the conversation in Spanish or taking care of the transaction in Spanish, they are appreciative, surprised, pleasantly surprised. I was in the state of Oaxaca, and I needed to take a taxi to the airport, and a Spanish speaker called the taxi for me and was like, got this tourist or whatever, need you to take her to the airport. And so I go out to the taxi and I greet him in Spanish, and he was just like, "You speak Spanish?" And I said, "Well, my Spanish is not that good." And again, this is all being said in Spanish because he did not speak English. And I was like, "My Spanish isn't that good." I was like, "But I'm trying." And he was like, "No, the foreigners here, the foreigners that live here, they don't even try." And I think, like he took that personally. So the fact that I had a little bit of Spanish, even though it wasn't that great, was appreciated by the people that I had interactions with. So I think that's a reason why we should try and learn the language. Also, you get to start picking up on like cultural nuances. I can now enjoy memes in two languages, and so when I'm very much trying to understand how people in this country feel about a particular issue. I can look at the memes. If there's a Facebook post, I go into the comments and I like try and see what people are saying. And so I think that gives me some insight into the community, into the culture, into like the environment, what's going on here, that I wouldn't have otherwise, if I didn't have some experience in the language. I'm having big trouble with accent. All of my practice Spanish sounds like my Italian. One thing I have learned, and because is that you it's one thing if you are a child, you're brand new to this and you are learning multiple languages at a time. Like you have a parent that speaks English and a parent that speaks Spanish. You can pick that up, you can differentiate. But as an adult learner, trying to learn multiple languages at the same time doesn't doesn't work well. So if you're like me and you're trying to pick up a language, focus on one, and that might help with the accent. When I was in Italy in April, I would try and pronounce the Italian words, but because I've worked hard on my Spanish pronunciation, I was not getting it in Italian, and them folks was looking at me like, "Girl, just stop," in a loving way. But and I always offered, I'd be like, "Sorry, I don't speak Italian. I have Spanish and I have English. Like I could do either one of those. I can't do Italian." But yeah, I would also say I'm getting so much better at understanding what people say to me. Like I think about when I lived in Honduras, I could not pick out words. People were saying things, but I could not say, okay, this is this word, this is this word, so on and so forth. Like the work I have put in has paid off in that department. I have been able to learn and pick that up. So there are definite benefits, advantages to learning the language, particularly if you are making this place your new home. And I've said to y'all on this channel multiple times, I consider Mexico to be home for me. So it's important for me to speak the language. I just saw, wait, where'd that question go? Okay, so I've got several questions here about like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Okay, so I just wrapped up an intensive Spanish class. This is my third time taking a level in this intensive Spanish program in the language learning portion of the local university. This is my third time. I have not done them consecutive because I travel, the way my schedule is set up, it doesn't lend itself to that. Initially, when I came to Mexico from Honduras and discovered that my Spanish skills were lackluster at best, I took kind of just like your regular Spanish class at a language school. And partially, I picked that language school because they let me bring my dog to class. But for the way that I needed to learn, and the thing over all of these years I have picked up is that if you want to learn the language, you've got to use it. That means you've got to be in a situation where you are being made to speak. I even had a man, I was at the airport. My youngest daughter had come to visit. I'm at the airport and I'm waiting to pick her up. And I guess this man was also waiting for somebody. And, he was like, "Oh, foreigner, let me go over there and talk to her in English." And so we're talking and he was like, "Well, what about your Spanish?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm learning." And he was like, "Well, you got to use it. Don't worry about sounding bad, just use it." And he was right. I didn't want to hear that at the time, but he was right. So the very first Spanish class I took, just like at a regular language school, I did very little speaking. And some of that was intentional on my part because y'all know I am an introverted introvert. I'm not going to be just chatting up folks. And I did not have the outcomes that I wanted. This intensive program, everybody online was like, If you want to see a big change in your skill set, you should do this program. So I did it. It was in person. It was about 5.5, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. That was 6 weeks. So you can imagine having to read in Spanish. Our teacher only spoke to us in Spanish, even though I was in Básico Uno. I was in basically the only people who were in a lower level than I was were the people who could only say like, hola. That was it. And so 6 weeks of that, I saw big changes in my ability, but then I got to traveling and I wasn't really working hard to hold on to it. I came back last October and enrolled in that program again. And then starting in May, I enrolled in the online class because the person I was all those years ago who could take the in-person class, I'm not that same girl no more. And so when I took the class in October, having to get up every morning and be someplace, that does not fit my current lifestyle and how I want to live my life. So I would not go back in person, not because the program wasn't good. It just, for who I am, who doesn't want any rules or restrictions on their life, that wasn't a good fit for me, which is why I tried the online class. This time online, 2.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so, and again, reading, speaking, writing, listening, all of those methodologies. Adelia, have you tried language exchange? It's when you connect with a Mexican who wants to learn English and you speak Spanish to them and they speak English to you. I love this idea. And I actually did this maybe once or twice, like 6 years ago. The problem is I don't like to talk to people I don't know. Even if it's in an environment like that where we're all there to try and learn, I don't want to talk to people I don't know. I've had private Spanish teachers, like when my traveling would not allow me to go into class. I've had a private Spanish teacher, and I used to crack her up all the time, telling her in Spanish, like, because she'd say, like, go out and talk to people. And I'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not opposed to it. What in my ideal world, I would find, I probably should start with maybe practicing with the security guards in my building, but I don't talk to strangers. And that will require me to talk to strangers. And that's my own hang up. Because I tell y'all all the time, I am introverted, which comes to your question, Brown Sugar Babe. Do you have any local friends? I have a few. So far, they're all people who also speak English. And it's because in order to make friends, you've got to talk to people you don't know. And I don't like to do that. So the friend situation is not quite where I would like it to be. And this kind of goes back to your question, or Black women build wealth. One thing I have thought about, but I have not worked up the nerve to do, there is a cafe that has a language practice, but it's for Mexicans wanting to practice their English. And I have thought about going. Like, I would not get anything out of it as far as my Spanish, but that might be a way that I could meet a local person, maybe, if I could work up the nerve to do it. But I figure, like, Wouldn't they want a chance to speak English with a native English speaker? In my head, this is how this all plays out. I would go, everybody speaking English, I would speak English, and then they'd be like, oh, you live here? Where do you live? And then it would be like on them to strike up the conversation and the possible friendship. I don't know. I don't know. But because again, I think practicing speaking Spanish outside of like transactional things, like going to a restaurant, going to a store, things like that. I need to find a Mexican friend whose life is a little bit like mine. Like I don't work regular hours. So trying to find somebody who also maybe, they call it work from home here is called home office. So if I can find somebody who also has home office, like maybe I could strike up a relationship there. But I'm not good at talking to strangers, which that's a thing I didn't realize about myself when I first started trying to learn this language, but it definitely has hindered me a little bit. Yes, in case y'all hadn't noticed, I have new hair. I told y'all last week I was going to get my hair braided, and it is so I could be like Kyoka, the awkward Black nomad. She was in town a couple weeks ago for her birthday because she's a baby, and she had really cute braids. And I said to myself, I need to get some braids too. Let me see what other question was in here. Okay, so yeah, I have done in-person group class, online group class. I have done private lessons. Because of my social anxiety and the way it is set up, what's most important for me in learning is to be in a situation where somebody is going to make me speak. If it is an environment where I can hide and not raise my hand and I don't have to worry about getting called on, I'm not going to participate. And if I don't participate, my skills are not going to be improving. If by chance you are actually, I was going to say the program that I was in is at the university here, which I think is the largest university in Latin America, UNAM, UNAM. They have a special center for teaching foreigners languages. You don't have to be here in Mexico to take the class online. You can take it from anywhere. So here's one of the reasons that I like doing that program. It is specifically Mexican Spanish, and it is specifically like Mexico City things. Like in the book for level 1, it talked about renting an apartment, and it talked about like different neighborhoods and some of the specific things like, oh, if you're trying to find a bathtub, bathtubs aren't very common here, that kind of stuff. So that's one reason I like that program here, because it is very Mexican specific. My online private teacher, who was great, she actually lives in Honduras. And I did that 2 years, 3 years, primarily during like when we were locked down for the pandemic, because she works at a language school in Copan Ruinas in Honduras. And, like you hear about people going to Guatemala to do like a homestay, language school, all that kind of thing. That's the kind of school she taught at. But because of the pandemic, they weren't getting new students. So she had pivoted to online. I learned a lot of stuff from her. She didn't speak any English. That's that's probably my biggest tip is if you have a private teacher or if you're in a group class, be in a situation where they do not speak to you in English. Because whenever I wanted to complain about some grammatical thing I thought was stupid or I didn't like, I had to figure out how to do that complaint in Spanish because I couldn't just complain in English. That's probably, I think that's the thing that's probably made the most difference for me. Okay, Sam, you say I love Unam, follow them on my LinkedIn. Particularly the in-person program that they have there, you can't beat it for what it costs versus what you get. You get 3 hours of class, like Spanish class, 5 days a week. Then you get 2 more classes. One is a cultural class, and then one is kind of, what do you call it? It was stuff like pronunciation, writing, spelling, stuff like that. And so when I went in October, my cultural class was salsa. So if you want to like immerse yourself in the language and the culture, it's a great program for that. The online class, you just get the like class part of it. I agree with you. At one point in Colombia, I was the only English speaker. It really helped you improve my Spanish. I was forced to speak all the time. Yeah, because the way I will find a way to work around, one of the things I did when I wasn't in a formal Spanish class, I enrolled in a screen printing class that was held in Spanish. And I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to print fabric, but also practice my Spanish. And when the teachers would come talk to me, the way I would find any other way to communicate other than speak. So I was like sabotaging myself. Okay. This is a good point. I was telling y'all about the program at UNAM. That's if you go to the main campus in the south of the city. There is a CEPE, which is the Center for Teaching Foreigners Languages. There is one of those in Polanco. Like their classes tend to be held at night, and I think it's geared more toward like professionals, people here who are here because their company relocated them, because they're working for the embassy. They did not get the cultural classes and the additional language support classes. But if you go to the main campus, and it is the same campus with like all the pharmacy school there, the medical school. It's like a real college campus, but there's a little section of this language school that is geared toward foreigners. You get the additional classes it's all included in the tuition. Is there a program designed for beginners with no Spanish foundation? Absolutely. When I first moved here and I signed up for classes, the language classes at UNAM, you come in and you do a placement test. And part of it is oral. And again, I told y'all, I was overconfident. I was like, I lived in Honduras for a year. Plus, I took this little 4-week Spanish class when I first got here. And I went into that oral exam and I just knew I was going to place into like level 2, level 3. They came back and they said, básico uno, basic 1. Again, I was just in the level up from people who could only say hello, if that. So yes, the program is designed for people who are starting with nothing. But it's intensive. Everybody seems to be pleased with their experience there, but it is a time commitment. So I am so happy that my current class finished today, because even not having to leave my house, still having to get up and be in front of my computer and have to work, I don't like that. I need a different approach for who I am at this point in my life. And I think that's an important thing to consider if you're trying to learn a language as an adult. You're probably going to learn in different ways than you did when you were younger and in school the first time. And it's okay that what used to work for you doesn't work for you now. Like, we evolve, we change. Why wouldn't the way we learn do that as well? Do y'all have any other questions? We started with the question of, do I really need to learn a second language to move abroad? And again, the short answer is no. But if you want to thrive in that new life that you're building, learning the language is a very good idea. Anybody else got a question? I see somebody asked about the braids I got so I could copy Kyoka. Did I get them done here? Yeah, I did. Last week. I don't know. What is time? I didn't know July was next week, y'all. What is time? How do calendars work? Great question. Do you plan to learn any other languages? Plan is a strong word. In my head, this is just me. I think to be a well-rounded person, you should speak 3 languages. I mean, I'm gonna own it. I speak 2. Will I be learning a 3rd? Doubtful. It is highly doubtful. I mentioned to y'all that I took French. I studied French in high school. I took French in college. Now I grew up in Texas. I should have learned Spanish, right? But at the time, I was like, I don't like the way Spanish sounds. I preferred the way French sounded. And then when I got ready to move abroad in 2016, and I was trying to decide on, like what part of the world I was going to focus on trying to find a job, as I reflected on it, I was like, you know what? I really want to learn Spanish. And henceforth, I started to focus my job search in Latin America. I do not have right now a burning desire to learn another language. And I told you, in my head, a well-rounded person speaks 3. I guess I'm not going to be well-rounded. Y'all know I've talked about this multiple times, and it is probably the primary reason I won't be moving to Portugal is I have 0 interest in learning Portuguese. While I spent, April in Italy, I kept thinking to myself, do I want to learn Italian? I don't feel as strongly about learning Italian as I do about Portuguese, but right now, there's no language that I am feeling compelled to. But I think if I were to, try and be a well-rounded person and learn a 3rd language, I would probably go back to French, because I think there's still some in here because this used to happen a lot when I first started learning Spanish. Less so now, that I would be reaching for a word, and the word, I'm trying to say something in Spanish, but the word I would find would be in French. That doesn't happen as much anymore because my Spanish vocabulary is better. But part of my hesitance to learn Italian is I really want a language that gives me the most bang for my buck. It feels so good that when I travel in Latin America, I don't even think twice about, like, how am I going to navigate and speak the language, because there are so many countries in this part of the world who speak Spanish. And because I have some Spanish, I can make it work. And so Portuguese, Italian, not really spoken that many places. So I think I would probably get the most bang for my buck with French. I have some French somewhere in my brain, but I will not be signing up for French classes anytime soon. Anytime soon. I speak Spanish. Do you think it would be easier to learn French or Portuguese? People be telling you that, like, oh, if you speak Spanish, Portuguese will be easy. Maybe they mean Brazilian Portuguese. I did not find there to be much that I could pick up or understand when I was in Portugal. European Portuguese may be different. I don't know. It just sounded like a bunch of nonsense that I didn't want a part of. So I don't know. I don't know. It might, maybe you need to think about something like Dutch. Dutch is a Germanic language. And if you're an English speaker, supposedly Germanic languages are easier for you to learn. I don't have any Dutch at all. I think I have 3 or 4 words of German, which isn't bad because I only spent a couple of weeks there. I spent way more time in China, and I don't have anywhere near the appropriate amount of Mandarin. So I don't know. But for me personally, I did not see my Spanish being an advantage for Portuguese. In some ways, I could see in Italian, I could pick up, like, oh, okay, I see what that word is. But with Portuguese, not so much, not so much. So if you are planning a move abroad, I think your desire and or willingness to learn another language, that, you know, as you're creating that list of these are the things I want in a country, I think how you feel about learning the local language should be fairly high on that list when you're when you're trying to decide and narrow down which countries might be a good fit for you. Because if you have no interest in learning the language, and you are trying, you know, it's like making a square peg fit in a round hole. You're trying to build a life in a place where you are not interested in learning the language. I don't see how that works. So I think if you do something like that, you're setting yourself up for some disappointment. So definitely, as you are building, you know, like your country shopping list, that's something that you need to pull in there. One of the reasons I'm not in Thailand is Thai. Yeah, I decided after spending time in both Kuwait and China that I cannot live in a country that doesn't use the alphabet that English does. It was too hard for me. I have no interest in deciphering pictograms, so that eliminates quite a few places from possible locations for me. And so as you are trying to sort out what place is going to be a good fit for you, that is absolutely something that should play heavily in that decision-making process. Otherwise, you are going to be setting yourself up for disappointment and just a really hard time, I think. So, thank y'all for coming to hang out with me. What is next Tuesday? July 1st. And my calendar is on the wall over there. So we should be back to normal next week because my time will be my own again now that Spanish class is over. Thank you to the folks who wish me luck on my test tomorrow because I'm absolutely gonna need it. This level of the class, I can see why a lot of people stop taking classes at this level. This program goes up to level 8. I am finishing level 4, and yeah, it's going to be tough. But thank y'all for the well wishes. I will see you again live next Tuesday, and hopefully I will have a video upload for you sometime this week. I'm not making no promises, but hopefully I will. Bye, y'all.